We're going to turn it right over to Kathy and get going with the morning programming. Kathy?
Hi, everybody. Okay, show of hands. How many people are sick of me? Okay, for those of you who've been here the whole time, you know, you're kind of done with me. I know that. We're going to just kick off first thing here with what I think is becoming an increasingly hot topic. I think that what ad exchanges and DSPs for a lot of advertisers have sort of been the TJ Maxx. I love TJ Maxx, by the way, of maybe digital media buying, in that, you know, sometimes you get some really good stuff and sometimes you really don't. But there's a couple of things that have recently kind of indicated that you know, you can do some really cool things even as a brand that is not direct response, which there's not a lot of direct response at Kellogg, right, Bob? Okay, good. You know, that really means that, you know, this is kind of coming of age as a way to approach digital media that is not just relegated to direct response. Part of it is what Bob is going to tell you in a few minutes. Another thing that caught my eye recently, thanks to Joe Mandisi over in the corner, was you know, that Ford is buying premium through DSPs and having a lot of success with it, which is kind of eye-opening. So our speaker this morning is Bob Arnold. He's the Associate Director of Global Digital Strategy for Kellogg. And before he got to Kellogg, he spent 10 years at, what's it, Procter & Gamble, that company, leading a lot of digital strategy for their brands. So he's going to share actually some really cool results with us on how the Ad Exchange DSP program is working for Kellogg. So please give him a round of applause.
Morning, everyone. Thanks, Kathy. So just a quick little background on me. As Kathy mentioned, I'm Bob Arnold, and I work at the Kellogg Company. We make cereal. And so my role at Kellogg is really three things. First, I help build the digital capability with our marketing teams. I co-create digital strategy with individual brands. And I also lead big digital bets or initiatives such as programmatic buying. So what I wanted to talk to you about today is brand marketing through programmatic buying. You know, for the large part, as Kathy mentioned, programmatic buying has largely been the domain of direct response marketing, and we've started to look at it from a brand perspective, and we feel like it's been really successful for us. So the alternative title of my presentation is How to Have Your Cake and Eat It Too, because we feel like programmatic buying has been very successful for us. So to maybe take a quick step back, you know, what is important to marketers? Forrester did a survey a little while ago asking media buyers, what are they looking for in their digital media plans? And two things bubbled up to the top. The first is targeting. You know, I've been in digital marketing space for well over a decade, and I can remember the first day I started my job meeting vendors saying, you know, the promise of digital marketing is that we can deliver your target with laser-like precision. Well, clearly, based on this survey, it's not actually happened yet because we're still clamoring for that. The second point is that we also want the lowest possible CPM, so the lowest possible costs. And so if you look at that and you sort of put it together, it builds into the analogy of having your cake, so maximize cost efficiency, and of course, eating it too. And you want to be as effective as other buys. So a quick story about these pictures here. The lovely young lady on the left is my wife, and you can see she's very good with a knife. I asked her permission to use this picture in the presentation. She said yes, but she got to choose the next picture in the presentation. So, so for the record, I don't eat cake with my hands. That's an eclair, although it did kind of get all over my face. So, all right. So, from what is programmatic buying? You know, for a lot of brand marketers, this is a new thing. A lot of folks may not have heard of it. So I want to spend a couple minutes just talking about it. So. Basically, programmatic buying is the automated bid price optimization of media. I don't know where I stole that, the definition from, but it's actually really accurate. but it's not a very practical definition. So I'm going to try to explain how it works at a super high level, and I'm going to simplify it quite a bit. It's actually a lot more complicated than this, but hopefully everyone will get the gist of what programmatic buying is. So if you start off with the advertiser, so Kellogg's over there, we create a brief. We have dozens and dozens of brands within our company that advertise online. And each one of those brands will create a brief saying, here's the consumer we're going after, here's the campaign goals, these are the types of websites where we think our message can really pop through, and here's how much we're willing to pay for that media. And so we pull it all into a brief. We hand it over to a DSP, so it's a demand-side platform. Think of these guys as your stockbroker, except instead of buying and selling stock on your behalf, they're going to buy media on your behalf. And so they take this audience brief and plug it into their computer systems, utilizing algorithms and so forth, and they'll buy media on our behalf. So jumping over to the other side of the continuum, the consumer, the most important part, consumers go online, and inevitably, they're going to go to a website that has unsold inventory. I'm not in the publisher business. I've never been there. But you talk to people, and you hear whispers that up to 60% of all inventory goes unsold. And so what's a publisher to do? They want to monetize every single web page, obviously. So what they do is they turn to an ad exchange with this request, and they say, look, I have unsold inventory. Can you help me sell it? So think of the ad exchange as, you guessed it, the stock market. And in these ad exchanges, people come in, buy and sell advertising inventory. And I just read a stat yesterday that per month, over 4 trillion impressions are bought and sold in these ad exchanges. So tons and tons of inventory. So this ad exchange will take the consumer information, website information, and put it out there in public space and solicit a bid. And so DSPs and ad networks and advertisers will go into the space, and based on the information that ad exchange passes over, plus the information that we as clients give to the DSPs, they plug it into their algorithms and determine whether or not they're going to make a bid for that ad impression. And they'll also determine how much they want to bid for that ad impression on our behalf. Well, let's say we make a bid and we win it, the consumer sees our ad. And so a couple quick things about this that I think are really interesting. First off, you'll notice that this is completely automated. There's no human interaction whatsoever, except people are sort of watching the campaigns, adjusting the algorithm as needed, and so forth. And so that takes away a ton of overhead when compared to going through direct buys or even ad networks. No more negotiating. It's all done by computers. And since it's completely automated, it happens really fast. It actually happens, this whole process happens faster than you can blink your eye, happens in 50 milliseconds. And if it took any longer, this whole process wouldn't work, because you want to make sure the consumer doesn't know that this is happening in the background. The other thing here is that there's complete transparency in both data and costs. And so we as advertisers, we know throughout this whole chain how much everyone's making from us. And it's not to say we would just want to drive costs down for driving costs down's sake, but we want to figure out where is value really being added. And if it's not being added somewhere, we're going to drive that cost down. Second thing is that through these ad exchanges, if you want, you can choose to only buy media on websites where you can actually see which website it is all the way down to the URL. So you have complete transparency, which is really important, because unlike going to an ad network, you never really know where your ad is going to be placed. So how do we look at this opportunity from a Kellogg standpoint? Well, from our standpoint, we knew, just based on the research that we had done, that it was going to be the cheapest way to buy media. It's going to be cheaper than going directly to websites. It's going to be cheaper than going to ad networks. The question for us was, would it be as effective? When I started talking about this internally, the immediate response was, well, it's cheaper, so therefore it can't be as good. And so there's a lot of people were worried about actually moving into this. And so what we did was we set up some extensive testing to understand what the effectiveness of programmatic buying really was. And so for folks who aren't in CPG, one of the big challenges we have in CPG is we don't actually sell our products directly to consumers. So it's actually kind of tricky for us to understand what sort of marketing really drives our sales. So we have to do something called regression analysis, or it's called market mix modeling, where we put a campaign through this process, and it'll tell us, how much sales or ROI came from TV, came from print, and of course came from programmatic buying. So we did this, and what we found is that programmatic buying is extremely effective for us. It actually drove a 5x improvement in ROI for us, which is huge, because this sort of shows that we're not just driving efficiencies by going through programmatic buying, but we're also going into an effectiveness play. As I talked about when I introduced programmatic buying itself, you have all these variables, all these algorithms that you can start to play with to really optimize your buy. And it's because of that that's really driven our ROI. So how did we do this? Well, it all comes down to creating the right recipe. And for the record, my wife and I, we don't have kids, so that was a friend's picture, and he was nice enough to let us use it. But clearly, he doesn't mind child labor laws, as this was actually for her birthday. He made her bake her own cake. True story. Okay, so like all big initiatives, it's all about determining the right priorities. And for us, there were 3 things that we wanted to focus on. First is our overall media strategy and understanding where programmatic buying fits into it. Because at the end of the day, programmatic buying is a tactic. And so we wanted to understand where in our strategy programmatic buying can really fit and really be executed against. The second is setting up the right measurement framework. The nature of programmatic buying is that it's real time, and so if we don't have a measurement framework to know how we're doing, we effectively can't take advantage of the medium. And then the third point, which I sort of led into, is fine-tuning or continuous improvement. Based on our measurement framework, we want to make sure that we're working closely with the DSPs to really adjust our algorithms and the way we operate together to maximize effectiveness. So I'm going to jump into each one of these and give some more detail of how we approached it. So the remit for marketers, and I actually heard someone say this yesterday, is very clear. We need to create the right message, deliver it to the right consumer at the right moment. And from our standpoint, creating the right message is all about the creative process and making the best creative possible. According to what we've found, creative quality is paramount over the rest of your campaign. And even though I'm here to sing the praises of programmatic buying, the reality is if you don't have good creative, you've already lost the plot. The media plan simply amplifies the creative message. And so we've done studies, and I've seen studies from ComScore and Dynamic Logic that showed that between 50 and 80% of the value from a branding campaign comes from the creative. So it's imperative you get that right. So how do we make sure that we put our best foot forward at Kellogg? It's pretty simple. We pre-test all of our creative. So it's no different than traditional ways of doing media, pre-testing your TV, print, and so forth. We make sure that all of our creative hits certain thresholds before we'll go live. Second point is around hitting the right consumer, and it's from this point forward that programmatic buying really starts to excel. What we found in programmatic buying is that it really does allow us to do laser-like targeting of our consumer, and it's just literally gone leaps and bounds over the way we used to buy our digital media in the past. And here it's all about managing Kellogg first-party data as well as third-party data to ensure that we're hitting the right consumer. The right moment part, hitting the consumer when they're most receptive. This is a little bit tricky, frankly, because it's not very easy to quantify. But what we've seen preliminary to date is that if we're able to place our ads in places where it's either contextually relevant or places that will support or even build our brand equity, and also catch her, when she's really engaged into the content, that these are moments that she'll be most receptive to our message. And so if you're able to do all three of these things, you're guaranteed to have an amazing media campaign. So the next thing is all about getting measurement right. And to be very frank, if we didn't have a strong, robust measurement framework set up, there was no way we're going to do programmatic buying. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of management's concern with programmatic buying was, frankly, it's cheap. And if it's cheap, it can't be as good. So what we did to alleviate those concerns was we actually created KPIs to address all of their concerns. So programmatic buying at the end of the day is buying media that couldn't be sold otherwise. So it's remnant inventory. And as soon as you say that to a brand manager, they freak out. And that's okay, they should. And so we were very careful in setting up our KPIs to ensure that we weren't going into brand unsafe places. We're making sure that we're getting high viewability. We're making sure that we're able to hit our target as well. So the way we measured these things is we actually started a global relationship, and we've been very public about it with Comscore. They help us measure these things, and we're able to track it pretty near time. Other things we do to sort of ensure that our campaign is going in the right direction is we do brand survey lift studies, again through Comscore, where we will measure things like brand awareness lifts, purchase intent lifts, brand equity, health score lifts, things along that line. Those are all things that help indicate things are going in the right direction. And then post, so long term, is really about the regression analysis that I mentioned before, determining actual sales lift and ROIs. So if you look at our measurement framework, there's really three important parts that I've talked about. First, there's pre, in, and post-market measurements that we do. So between all three of those measures, we can triangulate the value that our digital campaigns are bringing to us. And because of that, we've really started to understand, I think anyway, that what makes for strong digital media. Yep. So the third part is all about fine-tuning. And again, we couldn't do this fine-tuning if we didn't have a robust measurement plan. So what we do here is we really focus on ensuring that all of our data is collected and organized really well from Comscore. And actually, this is a lot harder than it sounds because there's so much data coming through. And so what we do is we work really closely with our DSP partners to focus on on those KPIs we called out. And then what they do is they manipulate the variables and the algorithm to try to maximize those key KPIs. And so and we also, at this point, can bring in first-party data from Kellogg, what we know about the consumers as well, to really help refine and optimize our campaigns. And so what's really interesting about this, too, is since our organization, our digital organization, is set up centrally, we're able to meet with our DSP partners and look across the whole company to see how things are performing. And what's really interesting is that with these algorithms, the DSPs have sort of commoditized our KPIs. So we're able to find something that works in one division and apply it to a completely different division. So for example, viewability. Let's say we're running a campaign on Pop-Tarts and we're seeing that by pulling certain levers that we're able to increase viewability for Pop-Tarts. Well, can we apply that to other businesses? And the answer is yes. We've done it to other businesses like Morningstar Farms, which is a frozen vegetarian option from us. So completely different consumers, but we're still able to apply learnings across the board with different brands. So those are the three priorities that we had. And what I wanted to do was talk a little bit more about how we had our cake. So what this slide demonstrates is, ad effectiveness, essentially getting the ads to the right audience. And so the first slide I know it's a little bit hard to see, but the blue bars, what those represents is the increase of on-target impressions for programmatic buying versus the traditional way of doing digital buys. And you can see that it's actually, in a couple places, bumped up over 100%. So we've literally doubled our targeting accuracy utilizing programmatic buying. And that's really critical for us because we design our creative for a certain consumer and we test against that certain consumer as well. So if we're able to hit the consumer, the opportunity for us to be successful is greatly increased. The second bar chart here shows the percentage of ads in view. And so I know it's a little bit hard to read, so I'll read it. It's 64, 68, and 71%. And these are just in programmatic buying with one of our partners. So they've been able to work with us and actually increase the percentage of ads that are in view with each campaign that we work together on, which is a true testament to what programmatic buying can do. The one thing I would say that's interesting here, although I don't have it up here, is when you compare this to non-programmatic buying, which, as I mentioned earlier, is more expensive, they have a hard time competing with programmatic buying to get ads in view. So very interesting. So the second piece of cake is what did it do to our costs? And again, this is an index. This shows for programmatic buying, when we first did it, it's at the 100 index. You can see that we've been able to reduce our effective CPM by half. And the way we calculate our effective CPM is we take our CPM divided by the percentage of impressions that are in our target divided by the percentage of impressions that are actually viewable. So so they have several levers that they can pull here, trying to get lower CPMs, trying to get things more in view or get them more in target as well. So we've been able to drive our CPMs down quite a bit. So how did we eat it? How did we eat our cake, I should say? So we were able to improve our ROI. So we've had 2 market mix models come back recently. For one brand, as I mentioned before, the ROI has gone up over 5x. And so we're really excited about that. And then another brand has come in with an ROI that's gone up over 6x. And so these are 2 huge brands for Kellogg's. We don't just test on small brands. It's one of the reasons why I love working at Kellogg's is people are willing to try new things. And so these are 2 huge brands for us, and we've been able to demonstrate very strong ROIs there. So I wanted to quickly conclude just with some parting thoughts on what's next for programmatic buying from my standpoint. So I think what we're going to see more and more is inventory entering the system. More and more publishers are coming to play here. As Kathy mentioned, Ford is working with quote-unquote premium publishers in this space. Recently, Facebook announced the Facebook Exchange, which is essentially a ad exchange, except it's only Facebook inventory. We're also going to see more formats. A lot of what I've talked about today are the standard, quote-unquote, boring IAB standard formats. And what we're seeing now is the ability to use rich media in these exchanges, mobile, video, and it's even extending into the offline world where we're seeing addressable TV coming to fruition as well. So, I think a pretty safe prediction, and a lot of people have made it, is that programmatic buying is going to take over the media buying space. And the third point is around better measurements. I talked about how much we love our measurement framework and how much it's helped us out. Well, the reality is we know it can get better. All of the measures I talked about were near time at best, and if they're near time measures and programmatic buying is real time, clearly we're not able to take advantage of what programmatic delivers because of that. And so what we really need from the industry, from a brand marketer standpoint, are real-time signals, some sort of signal, I don't know what it is, but some sort of signal to indicate that our branding campaign is working. So when I talked about the measurement framework that we have, you notice I didn't talk about click-through rate or clicks at all. And it was very deliberate. It's because we know that clicks and click-through rates mean nothing from a brand standpoint. It does not drive brand equity. It does not drive purchase intent. It does not drive actual sales from a branding perspective. If you're doing direct response, you're trying to sell something directly, absolutely click-through rate makes sense. But for us, as brand marketers, we do not care about that. And we've had a lot of vendors come in, especially lately, come talk to us about click-through rates. As soon as that happens, like all credibility is lost. And just being very frank, the conversation's pretty much over because we are a branding company, and frankly, we need the industry to really move toward brand marketers as well. So that's all I had, and I have a couple minutes left. If there are any questions, I can answer now or talk later.
Yes, we have a question.
Hey Bob, Randy Kilgore, Terma Video. So you made an interesting statement right at the end there that the programmatic, I think you said programmatic buying will take over the media practice.
Yeah.
So can you, just for fun, 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years out, what percentage of your overall media spend will be executed, as a guess, executed through programmatic buying?
Well, so my role is focused on digital, so maybe I'll talk about that. We don't like to give out numbers there, but we can tell you that it's pretty significant already. So there's not exactly a lot of space for us to grow. Said another way without giving numbers, we have a really hard time buying banner ads that doesn't leverage programmatic buying. So if you come to us and say you want to buy banner ads from us and it doesn't use programmatic buying, that's also the end of the discussion. So. Well, yes, so sponsorships and other things, that's different. That goes beyond just a banner ad. And so, if there's other value-added things, we're absolutely willing to talk there. But if it's just a banner ad and it's not going through programmatic buying, we just don't see a use for it. So.
Good morning, Bob. How has programmatic buying changed how you work with your creative and media agencies?
From a creative standpoint, in the beginning, it did change things because we were sort of shackled by certain creative formats, and that's slowly changing. And so they didn't like that very much. But now that more and more formats are becoming available, we're able to accommodate different formats. With the media buying agency, that's a longer discussion, frankly. The media buying agencies, what they've done is created something called agency trading desks, where they essentially white label DSPs and perform this work on behalf of clients. And we think that's an interesting play, and and I think it works for certain clients. But from our standpoint, we still work through our agency, but we also want to have a bigger say in how we work with DSPs.
Hi, Bob. Joe Mandisi from Media Post. So I know you don't like to cite numbers, but just to follow up on Randy's question, your answer, if I heard it right, I think you said 100% of your banner advertising is now bought through programmatic.
No, not quite. It just becomes really, really, really hard for us to understand, why we should do banner ads without,
right.
A sponsorship and things like that. So we're really pushing for, for this to take advantage of the technology that's available. So it's not quite there, but those are discussions we're having today.
Okay, so my real question then is, when is the diminishing return? At what point does it max out? And I know you don't want to cite percentages, but give me some generality. And also, do you see, as more and more impressions come into the market, I mean, 4 trillion is a huge amount already, but as the mix changes, obviously more and more of your inventory is going to go into that. And also, lastly, if you could put it in the context of your total mix, all media, and how you see this becoming more of a factor in terms of budget moving online or not.
Yeah, so there's like 5 questions in there. I think I remember 2 of them. But I guess, from our standpoint, when is the point of diminishing returns? We don't know, to be really transparent. We've only done, regression analysis, very recently because we only started doing programmatic buying recently. So, we'll have to run the models more to understand where the point of diminishing returns are. but I don't think we're close to it. That's my personal opinion. And in terms of, our, quote unquote offline dollars moving into digital, I think it's safe to say that, that's happening across the board in the industry. CPG, we're really waking up to where our consumers are going. The previous presentation talked about all the great stuff P&G and Unilever and other CPG companies are doing, and that's all online. So we are absolutely seeing more and more stuff going to digital.
Hi, Bob. Joe Farrell with Yumi, and I'll be transparent up front. I really have a three-part question. You said that this is moving, it's going to move into mobile, video, rich media, some of the more advanced ad units.
Yeah.
So what is holding up the process to do that now? What barriers need to be removed in order for that to happen?
Yep.
And when do you think it will happen?
Okay. So what are the barriers? Well, a couple is that the technology's not quite there. It's just now coming to fruition for video in particular. So we need that to ramp up. And so once the technology it becomes a little bit more stable, we'll see more and more publishers enter the space. Another thing that's actually holding it up, at least from my perspective, is that the measures are slightly different than what I talked about earlier with banner ads, at least from a video standpoint. One of the issues we've run into is being able to measure viewability of videos. And so, like across the board, there isn't a standard from the IAB yet on, what's considered a viewable video ad. And so all of those things need to catch up. The measures need to catch up as well. And once that happens, then, people can really get behind it and start spending money against it. And to answer your question on, where the IAB is and the technology is, I don't know how long that'll take, but my guess is probably less than a year. So it's coming soon.
Okay, so thanks. Lots of questions, lots of good answers. So give Bob
Thank
some
you very much.
applause. I think he deserves it.